Good afternoon and welcome USD to your favorite sports talk radio show, Bix and K. As always, we will be here with you from 2:30 to 4 p.m. Pacific Coast time.
That's right.
Kay, welcome back into the studio.
Thank
I know
you so much.
you were gone this last week. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to pull together a show on my own for all you guys. Last week, it's final season. Got to cut me a little slack. Things are getting busy around here, so had some academics to attend to. But we're back on the air this week. Got a whole lot to talk about, and we finally get to dive into this draft a little bit. Kay, I know it's something we've been super excited for the last couple months leading up to it, and it's finally over.
That's right. It is finally over. Again, our favorite time, one of our favorite moments of the year. One of the things I had to say was it was exciting from the get-go. Of course, it was pretty solidified that, Myles Garrett would go number one. But beyond that, the fireworks started just that next pick with the Chicago Bears trading, magic beans for a cow, so to speak, and getting Mitch Trubisky.
Yeah, as a 49er fan,
you got it.
Love to see that.
That's right.
I mean, first of all, kudos to new GM John Lynch and new head coach Kyle Shanahan for doing an incredibly good job. Their first draft together. I mean, you had GMs coming out at least after day one of the draft anonymously saying basically something along the lines of, "I thought John Lynch would suck."
Sure, I mean,
and he knocked it out of the park.
He had no front office experience. Obviously a gifted football mind, and a lot of people thought it was a wild pick, but it was it's turning out to be a good pick. And the reason I like it is because, you're a Niners fan, so I get more insight from speaking to you, but I like it because it seems like Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch are on a very similar page. It doesn't seem frantic, maybe like comparative to the Bulls, the Bills organization that we'll get to in a minute. But it just seemed like the identity was continuing to be, going forward. Getting Thomas in the first round and trading up for Foster. Two really good defensive-minded picks, and I think Kyle Shanahan needs that.
And like you mentioned a little bit there, their cohesion is evidenced by the fact that they selected two defensive players in round one. Those of you that know football know that Kyle Shanahan is an offensive-minded guy and surely was looking to boost the 49er offense that doesn't have much to work with right now. But I think when it got down to it, Shanahan and Lynch looked at each other and said, these are the best guys in the draft. It's a defensive-loaded draft. And like John Lynch said in his press conference after the first round, they got two of their top three big board players. Two of the top three players they had coming into this draft, they wound up picking.
And from what I remember, I could be wrong, but they didn't have to give up too much to go 31. I think they...
No, not at all. They gave up their second round pick, which was only probably 4 or 5 picks later, to the Seahawks.
34.
And they gave up an extra fourth round pick, which I believe they got in that trade with the Chicago Bears, an hour before.
And to go up and get a guy like Reuben Foster who has so much upside, obviously dropped a little bit due to the positive diluted sample at the combine. It was something to take in mind, but I think if you're going to take him, which John Lynch did, he had done his research. Him and his team had done his research. A lot of upside there. They needed a strong linebacker in San Francisco, and I think they got him.
And stepping back a little bit, at one of the more interesting and funny stories of this entire draft, for those of you that watched, you might be aware that the Niners traded back into the first round at 31, just above the Saints, who were picking at 32. And Reuben Foster was quite literally on the phone with Saints executives and Saints coaches as the Niners traded up. So then he gets a call from a San Jose area code, hands the phone that he was on to his sister to talk to the Saints people, grabs the phone that the 49ers are calling on, and it's John Lynch saying, hey, we're drafting you. And Foster didn't believe it. He said, oh, sorry, Coach, the Saints are taking me at 32.
Oh, man.
And John said, no, we've actually traded up above them, and you're going to be a San Francisco 49er.
What a story.
So not only a great talent, but a pretty great draft story to go with it.
And the Saints ended up taking, at 32, who'd they take?
At 32...
They took John Ross earlier.
The Saints wound up taking, I believe, Ryan Ramczyk.
Okay.
The offensive guard out of Wisconsin.
Well, what's funny is that's a completely different pick. But I want to go back up to the top of the board. So we talked about Thomas, talked about Garrett, talked about Trubisky a little bit. I want to talk more about the overall quarterback group that went in the top 2 days of the draft, or the top 2 rounds of the draft. So let's first talk about Trubisky. My gut reaction is he's a bust. I watched the quarterback camp he did with John Gruden. I watched the big board he does on, what is the show on NFL Network? I can't remember. Mariucci's one. It just seems to me like he doesn't have that it factor. And, my first comparison is, he was going kind of head-to-head against Watson. And I believe that Watson sort of has that it factor. What are your thoughts on those 2 picks, and we'll analyze the rest going on?
With the Trubisky pick specifically, the Bears caught a lot of flack for it. I didn't think it was a great pick for them. But what a lot of people have said is the counter-argument to that is really when you're trading up in the NFL draft, especially in the first round, you should mostly only be trading up for a quarterback.
Yeah.
And if you see a guy that's out there that you believe can be your franchise quarterback and can lead your team for years to come, you got to do whatever it takes to get that guy. So the Bears gave up a lot, but if they see Trubisky as that guy that's going to transform their organization, then a couple later round draft picks is not much to give up if he pans out. Now, you get a lot into thinking about the future, what's actually going to happen with him. Only time will tell. But a couple years from now, if Trubisky does pan out, then we'll all be looking back at this draft with a very different perspective and be saying, well, hey, maybe this wasn't as lopsided as it seems. Now, again, I'm not high on Trubisky. Yeah. I don't think that was the move.
One, you could have had the player of a generation in Jamal Adams, or maybe Jonathan Allen if they had needed that situation. My biggest concern was that they had just signed Mike Glennon, a quarterback that I don't believe in, don't get me wrong, to a massive contract. They sort of, the Bears, sort of told their team and their fans, saying, we have a placeholder quarterback, he's going to be our QB1 going into this season, and we can reevaluate next season when there's a better quarterback class next season. So why take a guy like Trubisky? Why take a risk on Trubisky when you had to trade up to get him? You had to give up certain spots to get him. You're not getting a late round guy. You're not getting a Dak Prescott. You're getting a questionable ACC quarterback
that started 13
games. Right? He wasn't. He wasn't an Andrew Luck. He wasn't a surefire number one. He wasn't even a Carson Wentz where you had some sort of confidence, or at least I would. So I'm very bearish on Trubisky. But moving on to Watson. So the Texans trade up to get Watson at 12.
Now, I like this pick a lot. And in our mock drafts, I actually had Deshaun Watson going to the Houston Texans, albeit with the 25th pick. I didn't see them trading up. But as soon as you saw Trubisky go and you saw Mahomes go, it was only a matter of time before someone traded up for Watson. I love the fit with Deshaun and Houston. And we were just talking about pre-show, Kay. Mm-hmm. Listening to Colin Cowherd the other day, I really liked what he had to say about this situation because he's very high on Deshaun Watson as well. And what he was saying was that Deshaun is the guy that has put all the work in. He's the guy that deserves the best situation coming out of college. And even though he was the third quarterback selected in this draft, he probably did wind up in that best situation. He's not going to make as much money as Trubisky is, but he's not going to go up north and have to play in Chicago, which is freezing, first of all. Yeah. It's a franchise that's kind of in shambles right now. Instead, he gets to go down to Houston, which will probably be more similar weather-wise to where he played in South Carolina at Clemson.
Right.
He gets an offensive-minded coach in Bill O'Brien, and he comes into a franchise that is already solidified and doesn't need him to be Superman from day one. So he's set up for success in the future, and depending on what happens now, we don't know if he's going to start this upcoming season or not, but he's got time to learn, and all the onus is not on him to have the franchise succeed.
Yeah, he really worries me. You know, I'm a Titans fan. The Texans are our rivals. He really worries me because watching the Texans play this year, I saw, and many other people saw, that even without J.J. Watt, they had so many great pieces, and I think all they were missing is that QB1. They couldn't find it in Tom Savage, obviously. They couldn't find it in the $72 million man, Brock Osweiler. They couldn't find it anywhere else, and this was the perfect move for them because, one, Deshaun Watson knows how to win. Two, as you mentioned, Bill O'Brien is a QB guru coming out of the Patriots system. Three, and I think this is the biggest point I want to make, with Deshaun Watson, his best offensive weapon is the defense on that side because the defense will be able to sustain the game, keep them in the game, whatever game they're going to play. J.J. Watt's going to be back there. They have a great cornerback core. Kevin Johnston's on the rise. Obviously, maybe Jadeveon Clowney is going to be finally a pick that we see panning out, and that would allow Deshaun Watson to come in a maybe they're down 7, maybe they're down 10, putting him in a position to actually win. Whereas, as you mentioned, if he were to go to Cleveland, there's not really hope right now for him to start winning. So I'm worried about it. I think it was a great pick, and I think he's going to find a lot of success in this league.
And the other great thing for Deshaun Watson, excuse me, is he gets to go to a team at which the number one wide receiver is a product from his university.
That's a good point.
Now, I'm not entirely sure if they wound up playing together. I think they may have missed each other by a year, but still, having that familiarity between Deshaun Watson and DeAndre Hopkins will be huge for them going forward. Hopkins is a guy that's familiar with the scheme that Deshaun Watson is coming from. They both had the same head coach in Dabo Swinney.
Yeah.
And so they're already going to have a good amount of chemistry going into things. Not to mention, it's probably only going to get better as time goes on.
I agree. And another thing I saw, I don't want to go on too much of a tangent. I don't know if you saw this, Bix, but the Bills said that they will not be signing Sammy Watkins to his fifth-year option. Maybe Sammy ends up in Houston.
Another potential option down the line. Sammy Watkins is a guy that definitely did get the opportunity to play with Deshaun Watson.
Yeah. One thing I want to say is I'm scared for Houston. I think they have a good organization. They have a great fan base. And now they have a lot of the pieces to sort of make a bigger push. But going back a couple spots, we saw Patrick Mahomes from Texas Tech go number 10 to the Chiefs before Deshaun Watson, although right now, not many people are talking about him. What are your thoughts on that?
It was a surprising move, I thought, despite the fact that obviously the Chiefs were very interested in Mahomes. It's still, I don't know if it's the right move for them at this point. Andy Reid is known for turning these raw, talented quarterbacks coming out of college into more refined NFL signal callers.
Yeah.
But
he did the exact same thing with Donovan McNabb in 2003.
And he had a hand in developing Brett Favre as well.
Yeah, that's right.
So he has the track record to do it, but Mahomes is coming into a situation that is good for him to learn. But the guy he's learning under is not similar to him whatsoever. Alex Smith is not a guy that's going to throw the deep ball a lot. He's short. He's precise.
He can
manage the team well. Mahomes is a guy that's looking to gun it down the field, show off his arm strength, and be a little more mobile.
Well, let me ask you: Does Alex Smith have a reason to be worried about Patrick Mahomes this season? Because he doesn't have too many.
No. Mahomes is a couple years away from being a starter in the NFL. The Chiefs are planning early for when Alex Smith is no longer around, but Smith has nothing to worry about as of right now because there is a lot of work to do with Patrick Mahomes.
It will be interesting to see his progression, and the Chiefs are going to be above 500 again and again for the next 2 years. It'll be a huge decision, like you mentioned, in 2018, 2019, when Mahomes gets the start, Alex Smith hangs it up. Then we'll really see if the Chiefs can actually make a bigger push and not just crap out in the wild card.
Absolutely. And really quick, want to give a shout out to a couple people, Josh Kuhn Miller and Austin Juarez, commenting in with some baseball and soccer comments and questions. Guys, we will get to that a little bit later in the show. Still talking NFL draft for now, but stick around.
Absolutely.
And we will get to your questions and comments in a little bit.
Thank you.
Everyone
so much
else
for
that's tuning in, comment away. Got a little cough today.
A little bit.
But comment in. We'll try to answer all your questions on air and give you a shout out.
It is 2:45. You're listening to Bix and K. Thank you so much for tuning in. We're going to continue with our draft recap. I want to move on to the first quarterback taken in the second round. A very interesting pick for me because he's part of the macro level of the Browns organization now. DeShone Kizer, Notre Dame. I love this pick because at the pick that they had in the second round, you don't have to pay this guy that much money if this turns out to be a success story. And you can experiment. This was your fourth pick in this draft. Might as well take it on a quarterback, and maybe it works out, maybe it doesn't, but it's worth it at that point.
Yeah, it was not a bad pick. I thought they could have gone a different way. I thought the Browns might go the entire draft without taking a quarterback and take their chances.
Osweiler?
And take their chances with Osweiler and the rest of the quarterbacks they have right now.
RG3.
But RG3 no longer a Cleveland Brown.
Yeah, he hasn't signed anywhere yet.
Not yet.
Yeah.
But I thought they would take their chances with the draft next year.
Honestly. Yeah, Sam Darnold.
But like you say, getting DeShone Kizer, excuse me, at a better price, a more realistic price, is probably a good move for them. And it gives them time. There's no pressure on Kizer to come in and be the guy, having been drafted in the second round. And he's got time to develop.
Yep.
So I don't know if this is yet the solution they're looking for the long term, but it is at least a better stopgap than what they had.
Well, yeah, they are building very similarly to say a Seattle Seahawks of 2012, building all the pieces around them. Obviously, Myles Garrett's going to be huge. Jabril Peppers can come in and be a leader. And then all they need to do is a quarterback. And if this guy is that fit, we might find success in Cleveland, which, at least in my lifetime, I've never seen.
Yeah, we're getting there. They had a good draft this year, but
draft.
It's still gonna take a little bit. Quick comment we got coming in over here from Mr. Gavin Singh asking about the Bills not re-signing Sammy Watkins and where we might think he will land. Just discussed this a couple of minutes ago, Kay, but it seems like you and I like the idea of Sammy Watkins winding up in Houston eventually. Obviously, he still has the last year on his contract, so he will be a Buffalo Bill for one more year, but they did decline to pick up his option for next season. So as soon as this season's over, you got to think he's out the door, and I think Houston will be a good fit for him.
I think so.
Especially teaming up with DeAndre Hopkins and Deshaun Watson.
You get Hopkins, you get Watkins playing at the 2. You get Will Fuller at the slot position, and you got Lamar Miller in the back, and Deshaun Watson throwing to all of them. I mean, that's great for them.
It would be a great move, I think, for the Houston Texans. So there you go, Gavin. Thank you for your comment. We appreciate it.
One thing I want to do, unless you had some thought in mind.
Go right ahead.
There's so many picks. There's 253 picks in this draft, and we can't talk about all of them. So what I want to do, Bix, is I'm going to just throw out a name, and I want you to just give me a sentence reply of what you think about it. We'll stick with the first round, dive a little in the second round, and feel free to ask me, reciprocate with me, because there's so many good picks. We've been keeping up with this for so long. So I'm going to get started with Leonard Fournette going at 4. We had predicted that.
Accurate and well needed for the Jaguars.
Okay, perfect. Let's move right along. I'm going to bounce around a little bit. If you guys have anybody we want to talk about, we're on Periscope, we're on 2 Facebooks, we're on ufsdmedia.com. Comment away, and I'll start asking. Mike Williams, number 7 to the Chargers.
overdrafted, but will probably work out for the Chargers.
I don't think so, but interesting. Let's go. Where did 17 Redskins? Jonathan Allen dropped probably more than anybody in the draft.
Injury plagued, probably a top 3 pick. Redskins got a great deal.
All right, perfectly. Ask me something.
Let's see here. How about Marlon Humphrey?
A bit high. Better people on the board, but he'll fit in Harbaugh's Ravens. I want to go with. Let's go with Foster, 31. We already talked about it a little bit.
Top 3 talent. Niners got a steal.
All right.
Next, Patrick Willis.
All right. McCaffrey going to the Panthers.
Incredible asset for Cam Newton. Makes him a better quarterback.
All right. I like this. One of my favorite picks in the draft, Buccaneers, O.J. Howard at 19.
Adds talent for Jameis Winston to an already potent offense.
Comma.
They need defensive players.
Okay. Semicolon. Yeah, I got it. Yeah. All right, ask me one. Let's go.
All right, Jabril Peppers at 25 to the Cleveland Browns.
Love it. Semicolon. Proven leader. Semicolon. Will fit in well. I want to go Evan Ingram, Giants, 23.
That was next on my list there. Surprising.
Yeah.
Not the tight end the Giants should have taken.
No, better people on the board. Let's go Steelers, TJ Watt, JJ's little brother. 30th pick.
Great value, first-round pick. Can't wait for Christmas Day.
Yeah, it'll be fun. It'll be a lot of fun.
Those of you who aren't aware, TJ Watt and JJ Watt, the two brothers, with TJ having been drafted to the Pittsburgh Steelers, will be playing each other come Christmas Day. So that'll be a heck of a defensive matchup.
They're on the same side of the ball, so unfortunately they won't be able to
Very true.
play with each other. But absolutely. Let's go. One of the people I was talking about the most, Taco Charlton, going to America's team.
Great pick, and we're going to talk about this one a little bit longer here because on the show 2 weeks ago, I predicted that the Cowboys would draft Taco Charlton. I wound up changing that as we got closer to draft day, but I see what the Cowboys are trying to do. Like I said, Jerry Jones is a guy that loves big, flashy, physical players, and Taco Charlton has all of those attributes. He's a huge guy, a hard hitter, a raw talent, but he doesn't have to come in and contribute right away. He'll have some time to learn, and if things pan out, he will be an extremely effective D lineman in the NFL for the Dallas Cowboys. And we got another comment coming in here from Mr. Gavin Singh about the 49ers drafting another defensive lineman in round 1, asking what's up with that.
Well, they're not just drafting a defensive lineman. They were taking a guy who's so highly rated just down the road, Solomon Thomas. I like that move. They're building something great over there, and best of luck to John Lynch. I believe we have another comment. Jamal Adams at 6. What's your thought on that? Because that was one of the biggest.
Coming in from Lucas Silverman. Thank you, Lucas, for the comment. Jamal Adams at 6. We thought that he would probably go sooner than that.
Definitely.
A lot of mock drafts had him going as soon as the second pick.
Yeah.
To the 49ers or the Bears or whoever it wound up being.
Yeah.
And
my Titans passed up on him.
It was surprising that he dropped that far because, like you mentioned earlier in the show, this is a guy that is probably a once-in-a-generation talent, or at least that's pretty agreed upon by everyone that scouted him and evaluated him. And looking at the top couple teams, 2 through 5, those are all teams that could have taken him. You look at the 49ers, who were originally the second pick. John Lynch, being a safety himself, I'm sure had an affinity for Jamal Adams. Could have gone that way.
Maybe he didn't see it.
The Chicago Bears need help in their secondary. They need a difference maker. They could have gone that way. The Jaguars, although they probably have one of the better defenses in this top 5, still could have used a high-end top safety.
Yeah, they signed A.J. Boye and Prince Mukamara, so their secondary was not needed.
And the Titans could have used a playmaker in the secondary as well. So surprising he fell this far. And good for the Jets. I know they had a lot of offers in terms of trading for this pick. There were a lot of people interested in it. And good on them for sticking to their guns and making a great pick.
All right, I want to ask you, there was 3 of the best wide receivers taken in the top 10 of the draft. We had John Ross going 9 to the Bengals. We had Mike Williams going to the Chargers, and we had Corey Davis going to my Titans. What are your thoughts? Who's going to be the best going forward?
Well, first things first, none of them should have gone in the top 10. I thought that was outrageous.
Yeah, there's something that
in the draft with quarterbacks especially, but also a lot with offensive players. Those are guys that will get overdrafted.
Yeah, even though my team drafted for one, I always say you never overpay for a wide receiver unless it's like a Julio Jones, right? Or even Amari Cooper. I didn't see these guys as being Julio Jones or Amari Cooper, maybe AJ Green. That being said, I think there was something out there that we as mock draft guys didn't know, because we had John Ross maybe 32. We had Mike Williams 16. We had Corey Davis 18 to 20. So there's something out there that maybe we didn't know. The biggest shock came when 5 overall was going to Corey Davis, a guy to Western Michigan.
A good pick, I think, for the Titans.
Yeah,
had they chosen him at 18,
if he would have dropped that far.
Which, I mean, going into the draft, we thought was a really good possibility.
Yeah.
So I like the fit for him. I think they could have gotten a better player at 5 overall.
Jamal Adams.
Jamal Adams, for example. And moving on, Mike Williams at 7. A good player. Phillip Rivers will be happy with the pick. It'll give him another weapon on offense. But again, there was so much talent still on the board that the Chargers inexplicably passed up on.
Where did Hooker go? Malik Hooker.
Malik Hooker wound up dropping to 15
to the Colts.
To the Indianapolis Colts.
Yeah, that was a big drop because a lot of us,
a lot of people had Hooker as the pick.
Yeah.
At 7 for the Chargers. But again, Mike Williams probably the best wide receiver in this draft class. It's conceivable that he would go in the top 10. Obviously, he did. I think he's the wide receiver that is best set up for success. John Ross is really the pick that, Corey Davis, Mike Williams, you can make arguments for them being in the top 10. They're talented wide receivers. Ross, I don't see it. I thought he was borderline a second-round wide receiver.
I mean, you had Marshawn Lattimore on the board, right? Even if you think you're okay at secondary, you don't pass up on a guy like Marshawn Lattimore. You had maybe take a Malik, take a
Reuben Foster,
Hassan Reddick, even O.J. Howard. I thought O.J. Howard was a great fit for the Bengals.
Or Jonathan Allen.
So many options. Why take a guy in John Ross where he's fast?
He's fast. He'll stretch the field, but that's it.
You also, you have a wide receiver 1. You're gonna draft a guy in the top 10 for your slot position that's very easily replaceable. It doesn't make sense.
Again, another guy that the Bengals probably could have gotten later in the draft, or at least traded back into the first round.
Yeah.
For.
Give up your second and your a third rounder next year or fourth or whatever. Come back, get John Ross. Why take him then? I don't know.
Another question we got coming in here from Lucas again is, Kay, which quarterback drafted in the first round do you think is most likely to start week 1? We've talked about these guys a lot, but in terms of starters, who's got the job week 1?
Well, that's a tough question because I think Watson, actually, it's not that tough. To answer your question directly, Watson gets it because of that weak QB room in Houston. I was going to say maybe Trubisky, but I could see that it's like a Jared Goff situation where Glennon starts the first couple of weeks. Trubisky maybe gets thrown in there because they're already tanking. But it's got to be Watson because you're not going to start Tom Savage if you have a guy in Deshaun Watson who has been, to 2 straight national championships, knows how to win, he's got the size, healthy. I think he's pro ready. I don't think Trubisky's pro ready.
I think Watson very well could start week 1, but I don't know that any of the quarterbacks will be starting come the beginning of the season. Obviously, Patrick Mahomes, long-term project, and there's no question that he'll be Alex Smith's backup for a couple years. Trubisky will, in all likelihood, unless he wows the heck out of everyone at minicamp, start or play behind Mike Glennon, who you mentioned was just signed to a big contract with the Bears. And so that leaves Watson, again, probably could start. I think the Texans might look to give him a couple weeks, maybe see how the beginning of the season goes. Depends on what their schedule is like.
Yeah.
See if they can get a couple wins under their belt before maybe they decide that it's finally time to put Deshaun in.
I just don't see them getting it done with Tom Savage.
Experience for Deshaun is going to be the key, and throwing him into the fire week one, he is a competitor, but I think he could benefit from a little extra time watching from the sidelines.
It's a good point, and it's a good question. We're excited about going forward. I'm trying to read this comment. What is that
you got a compliment coming in here from Mr. Dane Baker K, saying that you're looking like $1 million, and looking like a huge boss in that.
I got the pocket square, my man. I appreciate that.
Thanks for tuning in, Dane.
Yeah. So before we move on, it is 3:00. We are Bix and K. You're listening to Bix and K on this fine Tuesday. I want to talk about steals in the draft. It's early. We're still trying to analyze everything. But let's talk about some day 3 steals. And actually, before you answer that, I'm gonna shout out someone that is a really cool guy for us to talk about right now. Jamal Agnew, our USD Torero, going in the 5th round to the Detroit Lions. We haven't had a draft guy in a long time. I think since Josh Johnson, maybe.
I believe that Jamal became the second ever USD football player to be drafted in the NFL. Obviously, Josh Johnson in 2008 being the first one. But yeah, congratulations,
absolutely, man.
Jamal. That was awesome.
Very
I was
cool.
watching on Watch ESPN, and all of a sudden I saw his name pop up on the ticker right before it was announced, and that's pretty cool.
It is really cool, and so we take pride in that. But and I think maybe one day he's going to be a steal. People are going to refer to him as a steal.
Very well could be. Talked about how he loved the Detroit organization so much and how he felt at home there.
Yeah.
So
and he will be joining Tease Tabor in the cornerbacks room. So they have a lot of fresh young guys that they can maybe put in a rotation. I hope Jamal makes that 53-man roster, right?
Yeah, rooting for you, Jamal. Congratulations.
Absolutely. So now moving on to some other steals. Who do you like? Maybe late day 2, early day 3. Some names that maybe stick out to you.
So a couple of the names that stuck out to me were actually in the 5th round. So this would be day 3 of the draft. The first pick of the 5th round was Jake Butt, the tight end out of the University of Michigan.
I think that's a steal.
Now, not surprising that he fell in the draft because he did tear his ACL at the end of this last season, and it's going to be a while until he gets back out on the field. He had other fun fact about that. He had taken out insurance on his loss of value, so still collected a lot of money through that.
I think he made about $220.
Smart for him. But I think he is a steal even at in round 5 because he is probably a top end tight end talent, probably a first, second round pick if he doesn't get hurt.
Yeah.
And now they get the Broncos who drafted him get to pay him virtually nothing. They've been searching for a tight end backup to replace Julius Thomas for a couple years now, and I think they got their guy. They're optimistic he can get out on the field for the beginning of the season.
You know, one thing I want to know is so say they play Paxton Lynch or say they play Trevor Siemian. Rookie quarterbacks like to rely on big tight ends to just dump it off to. Your tight end starts blocking, runs a little short route, dump it off, 8-10 yards. That's really important for a quarterback to grow, and I think that's why I like the pick so much. Another guy that I had mentioned to you earlier, I believe he went in the 5th round to the Steelers, Josh Dobbs. Big Ben's getting old, and I think to take a guy in the 5th round, virtually paying him nothing, Josh Dobbs has impressed. He's played against the best, and I think the best game tape he has is his comeback against Florida in that Tennessee-Florida game. I believe last year. So, at that pick, I wish him the best. I've seen him play a few times, and I think he's a good quarterback. I hope he finds success.
Yeah, he wound up going to the Steelers in the 4th round, a little bit earlier. But I think he could be potentially the Steelers' long-term option when you think about the possibility of Ben Roethlisberger retiring in the years to come. Give Dobbs a couple years to learn under Big Ben. They're built similarly, both big guys. Dobbs is probably a little more mobile at this point, but I love the pick for the Pittsburgh Steelers, and I think that Josh Dobbs could be a great quarterback in this league. He just needs a little time to develop.
And you're not giving up much to get him, so I like the pick a lot, and hopefully it's an easy transition for them.
The other pick that I really loved from day 3 of the NFL draft was in the 5th round, 7th pick, not the San Diego Chargers.
Ooh.
The Los Angeles Chargers.
Yeah.
Wound up taking Desmond King, a safety out of Iowa. Had a breakout junior year last year or I guess 2 years ago now, when Iowa went to the Rose Bowl against Stanford. Didn't quite get that same production this last year. Iowa didn't do so hot as a team, so he kind of flew under the radar, but another talented guy that will have a long career in the NFL if he manages to stay healthy.
You know what's funny is I was when I was watching the first round, I saw like Mike Williams, and in parentheses it said LAC, and I was like, for the life of me, I could not figure out who that was. I was like, is he drafted by the Clippers? What's going on? It's going to take me a while to get used to that.
Same thing with LAR, Los Angeles Rams.
Yeah, I was like, who's that? You know?
Yeah.
A lot of good steals in this draft. Remind me, because I don't have it in front of me. Where I'm streaming from my laptop. 4th round Redskins pick, running back. Cannot remember his name.
I believe the Redskins took Samaje Perine out of the University of Oklahoma.
I think that's a steal. I think the Redskins historically have done really well in the 4th round, and they've done really well when it comes to players at the running back, wide receiver position. They can get some good steals, and I think they found a successful guy in Samaje Perine. I mean, he stepped up.
And speaking of Oklahoma, Perine's partner in crime in the backfield. Yeah, maybe partner in crime is a little.
That was bad.
A little too
bad.
But his partner in the backfield at Oklahoma, Joe Mixon, drafted in the 2nd round to the Cincinnati Bengals.
Yeah,
probably one of the more controversial picks of the entire draft. For those not aware, Joe Mixon, his freshman year at Oklahoma 3 years ago now, was caught on tape punching a woman, and if you haven't seen it, I would not recommend it. It's a brutal video, and brings back this whole discussion of domestic violence in the NFL, and is a player afforded a second chance or not, because it was a pretty disgusting video and a pretty disgusting incident as a whole.
It was, and I want to make it clear that I don't support or condone Joe Mixon even getting drafted or being eligible to draft, because it's solidified evidence. And going back to Gary Conley, who earlier last week was accused of domestic violence, it is important to keep in mind that the process is still going on, and it's alleged right now. So he, for that reason, he won't be fined by the NFL. He was taken by.
You're speaking about Gary Conley.
Gary Conley, yeah. He won't be fined by the NFL unless, of course, he is found guilty. But with Joe Mixon's case, I mean, I don't want to take too hard a stance on anything very, controversial on this show. But it's very solidified that it's on video, right? So I don't condone it. But let's see how it ends up with Gary Conley. But on a macro level, it's something that the NFL needs to address more and more.
Yeah, there needs to be some sort of policy overlooking all this sort of stuff, because the way I looked at it, and again, it was horrifying what he did. Don't condone anything of the sort. But when you look back at the history the NFL has, is how is Joe Mixon getting drafted when Ray Rice was excommunicated basically from the NFL community? And Ray, obviously was involved in a similar incident, which was just as horrible, and, probably rightfully so, did not wind up back in the NFL, even though he now goes around the country teaching young kids how to avoid situations like that and how to, deal with anger and these sort of situations in a better fashion. But but he was gone. As soon as that happened, you knew he wasn't making it back. Whereas Joe Mixon, the argument can be made, he was a kid, he was 18, all this sort of stuff, but here he is getting drafted in the NFL in the second round, no less.
Sure, and we'll see how how he condones or how he handles himself in the NFL. That about wraps up, because it is 3:10. That about wraps up our draft talk. We ended kind of on a solemn note, but on a whole, fun draft, very fun to watch. Who are we to say this? But we wish everyone who was involved being drafted, especially Jamal Agnew, the best of luck in the NFL. Yeah, man, make us proud. So moving on to another very exciting sporting event going on right now. The round 2 of the NBA playoffs has started. One of the first things I want to talk about, actually, is just up the street, the Los Angeles Clippers losing to the Utah Jazz, going to 7. That whole series made me very angry because I've been to a few Clippers games before. It just seemed like there was no energy with LA, and I think Doc Rivers has to be on the hot seat. And how can he not be?
Yeah, I probably agree. I don't think his players have really done much to back him up the last couple of years. I think the Clippers have now, for 5 straight seasons, I want to say, lost their first round matchup in the NBA playoffs.
First or second, but for 5 straight years, they have given up a lead. So they've always
given
led.
up a lead, that's what it was.
And they've lost in either the first or second. Never been in the Western Conference Finals.
Which is inexcusable. Five times in a row.
Yeah.
And I did have the Jazz. This was my only upset of the first round. I did have the Jazz beating...
And the Bucks. You had the Bucks.
I did have the Bucks as well. But I did have the Jazz beating the Clippers. I think they're the better team overall. It's as simple as that. The Clippers just didn't have enough to get it done. They didn't have the talent, which seems weird to say because you got Chris Paul, you got Blake Griffin, DeAndre Jordan,
All-Star starter,
and
Doc Rivers.
Still, they can't get it done.
And that it is sad. I mean, if you could say that, whereas a Utah Jazz team where they're never going to sign free agents, right? They're not going to play in Salt Lake City. They've only built through the draft. Their best guy is a good guy, Gordon Hayward, and they have good role players. But if the Los Angeles Clippers can't get it done against a team like that, I think that's something to be said about Doc Rivers. I think that's something to be said about building the right team. But I think the culture of the Clippers is still needs to be fine-tuned. And I was listening to, I believe it was Nick Wright this morning. I could be wrong. He came out and said that, or whoever it was, saying that the Clippers should just move to San Diego. What are your thoughts on that? Because, we're now a one-sport team going into the next few years, I'm sure. LA still hates the Clippers, no matter how good they are against, in contrast to the Lakers. Why not just move them down to San Diego, where they were?
I really love the idea of an NBA team being in San Diego, but I really despise the idea of another sports league trying to pawn off a bad team on San Diego. So you look at what we have now. The Padres are not very good. The Chargers were not very good. They wound up leaving. And there's not much. I mean, you got the San Diego Gulls, who are a minor league hockey team that are decent, and that's about it. So San Diego doesn't need a bad sports franchise.
Well, I think the points we made.
They can't even get a stadium done for the football team that they know and love and has been here for 50 years.
Well, you got to think about it. A stadium, and I don't want to go too deep into a tangent, but a stadium's a lot harder to build than a small arena downtown. They have the space for that, and I think the Padres are very much loved. They do suck, but they're very much loved in San Diego, and I think the reason for that is maybe. San Diego doesn't go out on Sundays to watch a game. They'll go out on a Monday or Tuesday night. They'll make a night of it. They'll go eat in Little Italy, watch the game, take the transit back home. They do that with the Padres. And I think it'd be a great move for San Diego because LA is not really, the Clippers are not really loved in LA. Talking about local sports talk radio, talking about, any sort of love that is of the city of Los Angeles does not directly relate to the Los Angeles Clippers. And the San Diego Clippers sounds good.
It's feasible.
It's
and
feasible.
At one time, correct me if I'm wrong, they were the San Diego Clippers.
This is where they started.
So
They played at the Sports Arena, if I'm not wrong.
potentially they could make their way back here eventually, but I'd love it if we got a good team down here in San Diego. Not to throw too much shade at the Padres.
I would say, as an NBA fan as a whole, I don't necessarily support a single team above another one. I will say if San Diego gets a team before Seattle, a lot of people will be very angry.
Yeah, that's very true. The Seattle would love to get a team back, especially after losing their
Why not make it the Seattle Clippers? Steve Ballmer lives in Seattle. He might as well just take him up there.
It could work.
You're near the ocean. The Clippers
franchise
work.
Clearly needs some sort of shakeup. Whether that's not necessarily a move.
And is that shakeup Doc Rivers getting out? Yes, no. One more year.
One more year.
Because he's the GM too. Is he going to fire himself?
You gotta go all out for one more year. If it doesn't work, I think both sides may just part ways.
Well, and here's the thing people need to realize is that the Donald Sterling incident did not happen that long ago. So from a PR perspective, firing Doc Rivers, who is an African-American coach who led sort of this quasi-revolt against Donald Sterling, it might still be too soon. So yeah, I'd give him a year.
But at this point, everyone's well aware that would not be the reason for Doc Rivers to
But it's a thought.
get
you
fired.
have to think about it.
You have to think about it, but, there's a track record now.
There is. And I think people are slowly but surely realizing that Doc Rivers is just not a good coach. I very much stand by that.
Yeah.
If you look at his numbers, he's just above 500, where he's had guys like Paul Pierce, Kevin Garnett, Ray Allen, only won one championship with them. Then comes here Chris Paul, Blake Griffin, DeAndre Jordan, and it's the outstanding bench, outstanding owner, still can't get it done.
Mediocre at best.
Mediocre at best. And what's funny is I think in this recent switch, D'Antoni and Doc Rivers have kind of switched places. Now D'Antoni is finding success, and I want to jump right into that. What a game his Rockets had last night.
Yeah, now that we're through talking about a team that's been eliminated, we're going to move on, like you said, to the Houston Rockets and the San Antonio Spurs series, which they played Game 1 yesterday. The Rockets blew out the Spurs, which was kind of a wake-up call, I think, to the rest of the league. I remember my eyes almost popping out of my head when I looked at the score, and halfway through the third quarter, the Rockets were up by 30.
Yeah, what's interesting is I've always talked about how important home court advantage is in any sport, but especially in basketball because of the acoustics of the arena. Oracle is a prime example. I really wonder why the AT&T Center is not that big a home court advantage for the San Antonio Spurs.
It's hard to explain.
Yeah, it is.
There's
it's ineffable.
no reasoning behind it, and you wonder why the Spurs weren't ready. There's something going on with them right now. They had a 2-0 lead against the Grizzlies. They coughed it up. They managed to regain their confidence, get their feet back under them, and take care of Memphis in 6 games. But again, you see them stumble. And this is a series that, especially if they go down 2-0, I don't know if they can come back from that.
Especially, because then you're going to Houston for 2 games.
The Rockets are too good for the Spurs to go down 2-0.
Underratedly good, because I think a big deal for the Rockets is that D'Antoni has said, you know what, we're going to play small ball also. And that's why I think the Rockets win this one, and the Warriors and the Rockets go to 7 in the finals, the Western Conference Finals.
I'm trying to reserve my judgment until we see Game 2 as to who I think will really have the advantage in this series. Because if Houston wins Game 2, I think they win the series.
Sure. Because
if San Antonio shows us who they really are and Kawhi manages to shut down Harden and they play like the Spurs that we're used to seeing, that's a different story, and we got a series on our hands.
Yeah. I think Kawhi is an outstanding player. But my problem with not with Kawhi, but with the system right now with the Spurs is that I don't think Kawhi, Tony Parker, and LaMarcus Aldridge really makes sense in the postseason. I think Parker's old, Aldridge lacks the postseason experience. Kawhi has to do a lot by himself, and he got it done against the Memphis Grizzlies, but the Rockets have been really good this year. I mean, they're a reason they're the 3 seed. Again, you're right. We have a potential six more games to go before a decision can be made. But this was a wake-up call because it was at home, and then even if you split the home games for the Spurs, you got to favor the Rockets in at least one of those the games in Houston.
I think this is a series that we could very easily see going to 6 or 7.
Yeah.
Which in the end actually favors the Golden State Warriors because then whoever comes out of that matchup is
exhausted,
is tired.
And then, I think, here's my thing. Rockets in 6, and then Rockets-Warriors goes to 7. Warriors get tired. LeBron James wins his 4th championship. Comes closer to being the GOAT. I just predicted the entire 3 months of basketball for you. That's what's going to happen.
We'll see how that turns out, but the way it's looking for me, I see potentially the Rockets winning this series in 6 or 7 games. The Warriors winning in 5 or 6 against
5 or 6
against the Rockets.
It's okay.
And then Golden State moving on to beat LeBron James in the NBA Finals because I think the Celtics will manage to take a couple games off the Cavaliers in the Eastern Conference Finals.
All right, before we talk about...
LeBron's not going the whole playoffs without losing a game.
Yeah, we'll see. Before we get into the following second-round matchups, I want to ask you, since you brought it up, is this going to be the highest-rated finals ever? Here's
if it's the Warriors-Cavs...
Yeah, that's what I mean, right.
It will be.
And this is my theory. One, soccer doesn't have a major tournament. They have the Confederations Cup. Won't last going into the finals. Two, it's it's essentially the trilogy. It's like watching the third, installment of a beautiful franchise. And people know LeBron. People know Steph Curry. Both their brands have increased dramatically over the last 2 years. And you throw in Kevin Durant into the mix.
Durant's chase for a first ring.
Yeah, well, he was in the finals a few years ago, but absolutely, he hasn't won. Yeah. And I think all of those aspects taking into account, you got to consider that this would be the highest rated finals.
I certainly think it has the possibility.
They got to make it there first.
Both teams have to make it there first, but they're well on their way to doing so. So we've talked about the Rockets Spurs.
Yeah.
Giving you guys our thoughts on that series. Warriors Jazz.
Yeah, I got to go Warriors in 5. Maybe they win 1 at home because Matt Barnes couldn't party in Utah and he found a nice Mormon girl and slept with her until 5 a.m. Not doing anything. Is late for the game, misses a good shot. The Utah Jazz win the game.
I'm going, bold claim here, but I'm going Warriors in 4.
Yeah.
I thought if
it's not that bold.
Yeah, but usually you give someone a game or so. You thought the Trailblazers would take a game off the Warriors.
Did they not? Did they get swept?
They did not. They got swept.
Yeah, that's right.
So I think the Warriors sweep through the Jazz and move on to the conference finals. On the other side of the league, Cavs. Do you think they're going to sweep?
Yeah, Cavs, Toronto. Don't sweep. Toronto is a great place to play. The We the North mentality it's really fun. I've actually seen a game over in that arena, and one thing I want to mention is that going to Toronto is not easy. So you still have the logistics of going to Toronto and playing. I think that could tire someone out. Cleveland loses 1 game. Cavs in 5.
I got Cavs in 6.
Okay.
And
they won pretty handily in game 1.
The last matchup
yeah.
of this round is the Boston Celtics and the Washington Wizards.
For me, that's the most fun one.
Celtics are already up 1-0.
Celtics are up 1-0. They, in the first half of that game, the Washington Wizards were dominating. Celtics come back and win it. Isaiah Thomas, I think, still has this fire underneath him. Brad Stevens, the next Popovich. But So I will go Celtics, but I'm going to go Celtics in like 6.
All right, I got Celtics in 5.
Okay.
And Isaiah Thomas continues his inspired play that he's had over the last couple weeks since the tragic and unfortunate death of his sister. He leads the Boston Celtics into the conference championship where they will meet LeBron James and the Cleveland Cavaliers.
Yeah, that'll be fun. LeBron has had an interesting history with the Celtics. So, obviously it's a different look. No more Rajon Rondo and whatnot. But, so you have, correct me if I'm wrong, you have Celtics, Cavs, do you take Houston or Spurs?
Houston and Golden State.
And then we got...
in the Western Conference.
And then the finals?
Finals rematch. Cavs, Warriors.
Warriors in what, 6?
Warriors in 6.
Cavs in 7 again. Cavs in 7.
I would not be too happy if that happened.
That would be awesome.
That would be every Warriors fan's nightmare.
We are very lucky as sports fans to be watching this. And if either the Golden State Warriors or the Cleveland Cavaliers do not make it to the finals, it would be probably the worst rated finals in the last 5 years.
In the last 5 years,
yeah.
It would still be heavily watched and heavily tuned
but
into.
if it's like Rockets, Cavs, or if it's Warriors, Boston, I can't see it being obviously the true mentality of what makes that series so fun. I can't see it taking place. But moving on to another really fun and exciting playoff series that's going on right now, the Stanley Cup playoffs. I'm all in on playoff hockey. It is so much fun to watch.
Yeah, and the NHL being something that we haven't talked a whole lot about on our show generally, this is really fun for Kay and I because it's a sport that both he and I are learning more about, we're getting more and more excited about, and certainly watching the NHL playoffs has been a blast.
We have our respective teams, but we don't know. We can't name every player on them. But the mentality of us being casual fans and rallying around our cities, that's what makes it so fun. And that's why I've been so interested this year, because my Predators have been on a tear. I mean, they're up 2-1 against St. Louis. They swept the number 1 seed Blackhawks.
Having been the 8th seed.
I mean,
coming into the playoffs, the last seed in the Western Conference.
Exactly. And, the city of Nashville is becoming more and more of a hockey town, but you wouldn't directly associate it. It's not Edmonton. It's not Vancouver. It's not even Chicago or, Philadelphia. It's Nashville. Nashville you don't consider a hockey town, but that's what's making it so fun. Everyone's sleeping on them. I'm really all in on playoff hockey. And a big reason is because every game is so important, and you can see that in the mentality of how they play.
So let's go series by series here, Kay, like we love to do, and start with your Nashville Predators taking on the St. Louis Blues. The Predators are currently up 2-1 in the series. Now, a little recap for those that may not have been following along. The Preds won their opening playoff matchup in a sweep, beating the number 1 seed Chicago Blackhawks 4-0. And the St. Louis Blues upset the Minnesota Wild 4-1 to move on, so that these two teams could play each other. Your thoughts on how the series has gone so far and how it ends up?
So right now, Nashville leads 2-1. Unfortunately, they did suffer a major injury. Fiala went down. St. Louis they actually beat the number 2 seed on that side of the board. So both the underdog, so to speak, Nashville being the major underdog, they both have a lot to play for. St. Louis especially, that's a city that's down and out. They don't have much left over there. But I think I'm going to have to stick with my Nashville Predators advancing to the finals on that side of the puck and winning in 6.
In 6 games.
Yeah, they have a game again tonight. I think St. Louis takes it tonight, ties it up 2-2. Nashville finishes off 4-2.
All right, so you have the 8 seed getting into the conference finals.
I do. It's the miracle on ice.
All right, the next matchup on the Western Conference side of things, the Anaheim Ducks against the Edmonton Oilers. Now, the Oilers got to this point by beating my San Jose Sharks 4-2 in the series, and the Ducks got here by sweeping the Calgary Flames 4-0. So these two teams now facing off. Edmonton currently holds a 2-1 lead in the series, a surprise to a lot of people.
So the Ducks are the number one seed on that side of the board, right?
They are indeed. Well, they are the number one seed
Of the Pacific.
Yes.
Right. We're still learning. The Ducks are losing, though, right now to the Oilers 2-1, like you mentioned. But I think I'm still going to give it to the Ducks. This one might go down to the wire, and I hope it does, because if my prediction comes true and the Predators play the winner of this, they'll be tired. So I'm going to go with the Ducks in 7.
I'm going to differ from you a little bit there and take the Oilers in 7.
Okay.
I think they can take 2 out of the next 5 games. It's very feasible for them. Connor McDavid, their young star player, playing extremely well and going to lead his team into the conference championships.
That is quite a trip, though, Edmonton to Anaheim. That's got to be tiring for the team.
Yeah, it's got to be a very long trip, and I don't know. I think Edmonton probably does the most traveling of the two teams, I would say, throughout the year. So I think they may have the advantage in that respect.
Well, I mean, Anaheim's on the corner of the country, but they play in a division that's near. Yeah. Moving on to the other side, we have the New York Rangers, who won 4-2 against the Montreal Canadiens. Again, the New York Rangers are a wild card team, but they were one of the better teams to come out as a wild card. Playing against.
And then on the other side, we have the Ottawa Senators, who got to this point by beating the Boston Bruins 4-2 in their series.
Who do you like?
This one is
Ottawa leads
probably
2-0.
more straightforward. Ottawa is up 2-0. New York is too good of a team to get swept. I think it probably winds up going to 5, maybe 6.
I like that pick. I think I'm gonna go with Ottawa as well. As for 2 wild cards in the respective Western and Eastern Conference Finals. So yeah, I'm gonna stick with Ottawa. They have the 2-0 lead. They could be like the Golden State Warriors and blow it, but I don't think they will.
Too soon.
Yeah, too soon. Right.
And lastly, probably the best matchup of this round in the NHL is the Washington Capitals and the Pittsburgh Penguins. Penguins got here by winning their opening series 4-1, and the Capitals won their opening series against the Toronto Maple Leafs 4-2. So two teams that have faced each other a whole lot in the past, and the Penguins have the better track record overall, even though, again, yet another year, the Washington Capitals come in as the favored, higher-seeded team. The Penguins are still up 2-1 in the series.
They are up 2-1. I know a lot of Washington Capitals fans that really feel that this is their year. Again, I think they've said that a couple of times, as you've mentioned. I like the Capitals to move on here. I think they are down. I believe they play tonight as well. If Pittsburgh wins tonight, it's kind of over. But if the Capitals are able to tie it and then go at least split it in Pittsburgh, I think they have a really good shot to advance, and I hope they do. I mean, the Capitals have a great team to watch. They're a big market. The Penguins are too. Don't get me wrong, but it'd be fun to see Senators, Capitals on that side of the puck. Yeah,
I wound up picking the Penguins before this series even started. I want to stick to my guns in order to say that I stuck it out, but I think the Penguins have a much tougher time in the back half of this series, because breaking news from today, Sidney Crosby, who took a big hit last night, is out for Game 4 with a concussion, which is a huge deal for the series.
And they're playing in Pittsburgh.
I believe so. It will potentially shift the power dynamic and the momentum that the Penguins had going. The Capitals won Game 3 in an overtime, with an overtime goal, no less. So they're down in the series, but they're carrying that momentum. And if Pittsburgh wants to win, I think, despite the fact that they're up 2-1, they have to win tonight.
Yeah, sorry, my Facebook guys, I don't know if you can see Bix or not, but there you go. Yeah, they do have, it's a must-win game. It's a good night for playoff hockey. I mean, I think they play tonight, and if they do, I'm definitely tuning in. I'm going to be split screening the Predators game with that game. One critique I have of the Stanley Cup playoffs. You're looking online on their website, right? Scroll down.
I am.
So just read out those networks that these games are on.
NBCSN, CNBC, USA, and NHL Network.
I have a big problem.
And the normal NBC station.
So I had to like flip through my channels for the whole first period of a game to even find any of these games coming on. I've been critical of that on the show. I've been critical of the MLB Network doing or the MLB doing a very similar thing, and I think that's why NBA playoffs are very successful. Is that it's just TNT and ESPN, and they both have great teams.
And they're big, well-known stations for the NBA.
When NBC does a good job of their coverage, but I've tuned into the Predators game, and I had to watch an overtime game of another team, and they were saying, if you want to watch the game, you got to go online. No, that's not what I'm going to do. I want to watch my game, and it's very easy to do that for the NBA playoffs. Don't give me this.
And especially as a college student, the one channel that you're probably getting is the cable NBC channel. And so if you want to watch any other game, you're not getting NBCSN, you're not getting CNBC, you're not getting USA.
And you're especially not getting the NHL.
And you're especially not getting the NHL Network.
Well, it's fine. I have a basic package, and I think I get CNBC. I might get USA, but the fact that I have to question that is a problem in its own right.
So, enough about the channels that we're watching the games on. Certainly makes a difference in who is actually tuning in. But who do you have going all the way?
Ooh, who do I want to have going all the way, or who do I have going all the way? I want the Preds, but I think it's the Capitals here to at least make it. And hopefully, if it turns out the way I want it to, I hope it's the Preds and the Capitals in the Stanley Cup Finals.
I'm looking at the Preds and the Penguins.
You are looking at the Preds, all right? Cool, I love it.
I hope the Penguins can hold on and prove me right. So we'll have to see.
So before we move on, Predators Ducks, is that your pick?
Predators Oilers for me.
And
we got a couple guys commenting in here, namely Austin Juarez saying Ducks all the way. Sorry, Austin, I've got Edmonton in 7.
Edmonton in 7. So you got over the Anaheim Ducks.
Over the Anaheim Ducks.
On the other side of the puck, you have Pittsburgh and Ottawa.
Yes.
And I have the Capitals and Ottawa.
Yes.
So Preds Capitals for me, Preds Penguins for you. Well, that's good news for me if it works out that way. I think Nashville's ready to go all in on hockey, and I think we've already gotten to that point. We had DeMarco Murray come out and lead the cheering section, which is really
awesome.
Cool. Yeah,
I love that.
Yeah, moving on to soccer though, it's been a big couple of weeks for us. For World Soccer. What do you want to open with, Bix?
Let's dive right into the game that we just saw about an hour and a half ago. The Champions League matchup, the Madrid derby.
Yeah, I was able to watch that game, and the first thing I noticed is Madrid. They look. I gotta specify. Real Madrid looked really good. I was noticing that their possession was not where they wanted to be in the first few minutes, but they really tightened it up. Got that early goal. Was able to sustain it, and got a solid 2-0 lead at the Bernabeu. Going into the second leg, I believe Ronaldo scored both, or Ronaldo scored the first one only.
Ronaldo scored all 3 goals today.
There's 3
for Real Madrid.
3, that's right.
3-0 the final. Which
I had to.
It's only the first leg, but you got to think it's pretty much said and done. Especially with Atletico not nabbing that crucial away goal.
If it was 3-1, it would be a very different story. We would give them a fighting chance. But you're right. Because if it ends up going, next week or in 2 weeks at the Estadio Calderón, it has to be said that even if Atletico is able to nab 3 goals in somehow, Real Madrid could definitely score 1 away goal to lock it up. But I think it's pretty much over. And then Real Madrid would either play Juventus or Monaco, who play tomorrow. What's your thoughts on that game?
That first leg will be tomorrow. I'm interested to see how the first half goes, because that will tell us pretty much what we can expect for the rest of the tie. If Juventus dominates early on, I think we'll have two pretty boring return legs when you think about the matchups for next week. But if Monaco can hold their own, maybe get a goal, then that switches everything up and we'll have an interesting matchup. Because essentially what we're looking at here is Juventus' defense against Monaco's offense.
Yeah, and the winner of that, or the victor of that, historically this season has been Juventus' defense. Juventus has had to defeat the likes of Barcelona, which they did pretty handily. Before that, they had another test, which I cannot remember off the top of my head. Monaco seems to be the house cat against the Lion, but we've said that before when they defeated. Who did they defeat in the first round?
Who are we talking about?
Monaco.
Are you talking about Borussia Dortmund?
Yeah, Dortmund. Sorry, I'm just trying to organize all my thoughts. Because my thoughts are on Tottenham Hotspur versus Arsenal, which I want to get to in a minute. But I would see that Juventus kind of takes it on this one. Monaco had a great run, but the best team always wins. But I'm rooting for Monaco. I like it.
I am heavily rooting for Monaco, being the only French team left in the competition, and the only French team to make it this far in the competition for a long time. So it remains to be seen if their prolific offense can break through that Juventus defense. You think about Kylian Mbappe, who will be crucial in especially this first leg, because if they can get a couple goals, then that's going to be their key to moving on.
Yeah, you're right. And as a Barca fan, I am kind of curious as to who I should root for, because on one hand, Juventus did knock out Barcelona relatively handily. But if Monaco were to somehow advance, Madrid would have a very easy route, in the final in Cardiff to win their 11th Champions League victory. Whereas I believe Juventus would give them a much harder path.
I do think, though, that if Monaco manages to get past Juventus, it will be easier for them to break through and score against a team like Real Madrid. So we could potentially have a higher scoring final as opposed to a more defensive battle if it came down to Real Madrid and Juventus. But looking at the matchup set for tomorrow, the first leg of this tie will be played at the Stade Louis, the home of Monaco. So potentially, if they're even able to hold off Juventus, maybe only, keep a clean sheet, give up one goal, then no matter what happens, win, lose, or draw, they have an extremely good chance to go through, because we know this Monaco team can score, and I'd give them a pretty good shot at putting away at least a goal or two, even when they go play in Turin.
So what's your score prediction for the first matchup?
For the first matchup, I'm going to go 1-1.
I was thinking very similar. I was leaning maybe 2-1 Juventus, but I think, with that home field advantage, they keep it to 1-1. Only problem is, if you're rooting for Monaco, the only problem is Juventus has that away goal on them going back into Turin or Torino. It should be a fun one. It's not necessarily, if you're a casual fan, not necessarily the biggest names. It's not Barcelona, Madrid, Bayern, Manchester United, and so on. But it should be a fun one, and I think if you're looking to see a really good defensive battle, as you've mentioned, versus a very strong offense, this would be the team to watch. A lot of the game will be played on one side of the half.
Absolutely. So that wraps up Champions League talk for this week.
That's right. We have 15 minutes left in the show, and I want to take this moment to apologize to you, Bix, because your team, your beloved team, Arsenal, has passed away. So they are in memoriam for this season. Yeah, you're gonna miss them, man, because they're not even gonna be in Champions League.
Yeah, for all you fellow Arsenal fans out there, St. Totteringham's Day is officially canceled this year. It's only 1 year, so I'm calling it a leap year because we should be back come next season and regain
really?
our rightful place above Tottenham. But for the first time in 22 years, Tottenham Hotspur will finish above Arsenal in the Premier League table, which, unfortunate as it is
that confirmed?
Is a reality. It was confirmed this last weekend with Tottenham's 2-0 victory over Arsenal at home, and man, was that a tough one to watch.
17-point gap.
Yeah.
Wow.
Quite the gap there. It leaves Arsenal in a difficult position, 6 points out of a Champions League spot, though they do have a game in hand on Manchester City, so presuming they win that, they would be 3 points out with 4 games to go. Not inconceivable that Arsenal would find a way to wriggle back into that 4th place that they are so accustomed to,
Not inconceivable.
but certainly unlikely.
Definitely, and that leaves a big question, very similar to the question we had about the Los Angeles Clippers. Is Arsene Wenger out at the Emirates?
He is not out because Arsene Wenger will leave when Arsene Wenger wants to leave.
That's very true.
That being said, I
He
love
be
the
out?
guy.
Should he be out?
Been a huge fan of him for a long time. The reason I love Arsenal Football Club, I will always love Arsene Wenger, but it's time for him to go. At this point, he is one of the greatest managers of all time.
Oh, yeah.
But he has fallen behind the times. He was talking about the other day how he was so revolutionary going to a back three, which has been commonly adopted in the Premier League the last couple of years. It's, at one time he was the top of the top and he brought everyone up to his level, did a great job of that. But it's time for new management all the way around at Arsenal, and they need to get new players as well. There will be a lot of influx this summer, I think, and we will see a new Arsenal Football Club come next year.
Can I just say something? If Arsene Wenger was able to bring in Edinson Cavani or Karim Benzema in the last 4 years, he would still be very solidified in the Champions League, in the top 4, perhaps even competing, and there would be no question of his job security.
Those are great players, but I think he would have needed more than just one of those two guys in order to maintain that status. It's unfortunate, the fall that we've seen, but we're here nonetheless.
Does Alexis start at the Emirates next year?
I think that he will be back.
Okay.
I think that he will be back. But moving on to the title race between Chelsea and Tottenham, 4 points separate the two teams with 4 games to go. Is there any chance that Tottenham is able to pull this one out?
So Chelsea can lock in the Premier League if they win 3 of their next 4. Tottenham will have the harder route. Obviously, they're 4 points behind, and they will have to not only play their best, get 4 pretty huge victories. They will have to also cheer for a Chelsea loss at some point. If Chelsea can lose and draw 1 game, Tottenham has a fighting shot. The great thing for Tottenham, and I guess the bad thing for Chelsea, or if you're a Tottenham fan, your team is healthy, but Chelsea's team is very healthy as well. So injuries are not going to be a problem going into the last few games. It is very interesting that the Premier League is back to its norms again, because this time last year, if I'm not wrong, it was either this show or the next show. We were confirming that Leicester City had just won there.
It was a year ago to the day.
To the day, right?
That Leicester City.
It was right before the show.
Yes, right before the show. That Leicester City won the Premier League in one of the most historic sporting events of all time.
We came in. We opened with that on this show. One of the best moments on this show. One of the moments that I will be remembering for a long time. Of course, we're back to we've stabilized as a league, and it's pretty much looking like Chelsea's going to win. But I'm going to root for Tottenham. I think Tottenham. You're an Arsenal fan, so
I will absolutely 100% be rooting against Tottenham. So I won't say this often, but go Blues, win the title, please God, win the title. But looking at the games that both these teams have left, Tottenham has the tougher matchups, which leads you to believe that it may not be meant for them this season. The last 4 games for Tottenham are against West Ham, Manchester United, Leicester City, and Hull City.
And 3 of those are away.
Compared to what Chelsea has, they're staring down at Middlesbrough, West Brom, Watford, and Sunderland.
3 of those are at home.
Indeed. And 2 relegation teams.
2 relegation teams. They finish against Sunderland. So
the bottom team in the Premier League.
You could think that, I was having this debate this weekend when friends and I were watching this game. Maybe Sunderland treats us as we have nothing to lose, so we're just going to go out and kick some butt.
Who knows? It could happen,
It
but I think Chelsea's well on their way.
And what's interesting is that this is the battle of the new stadium teams, as both of them have started construction on the new Stamford Bridge and the new White Hart Lane.
And reports that the NFL has actually donated $12 million to the project of Spurs and building their new stadium to potentially look at putting a team in London or just continuing the London series.
Continue your presence in London. That's awesome. Just don't have a team there. It just doesn't make sense. I mean, it really just does not make sense. Anyway, we have about 8 minutes left in the show. We've talked enough soccer right now. Let's get into some rapid fire bits.
Yeah, and rapid fire, get into a little baseball here that we haven't talked a lot about throughout the show. But one thing that's kind of come up in the last 24 hours that I wanted to ask you about, Kay, is this issue of racism in the sport of baseball. And I'm talking about more from the side of fans. Those of you who aren't aware, Adam Jones, the all-star center fielder for the Baltimore Orioles, was subject to racist taunts last night at Fenway Park in Boston, with fans calling him all sorts of obscene things and even throwing peanuts at him. So rightfully, he was very upset after the game and voiced his displeasure with how teams and Major League Baseball have handled this kind of thing, because the fan gets kicked out of the stadium, but that's about it. So Kay, what can Major League Baseball or specific teams do to aid in this fight against racism?
Well, Adam Jones has been an interesting voice for racism, because obviously the African-American presence in baseball is not as prevalent as other sports. He has actually come out and talked about racism previously. Before I answer your question, I think it was a nice move by the Red Sox, even though it wasn't technically their direct fault, to come out and apologize to Adam Jones, his family, and the Baltimore Orioles organization and fans. That was a nice move. I think that this issue is obviously systemic, and on a macro level has to do with the unlocking of some of the mindsets that we've had to deal with in the last few years. That being said, that should not be an excuse, especially in the world of sports, where we use the field, the court, the ice as an equalizer. It doesn't matter who you are. It matters what you represent, and the competition and the ferocity stays between the lines. And I think it should be said that this was a reminder to us that no matter how far we've come, we still have a lot more to go. I don't have a direct answer, but I think people should realize that that's what sports is all about. It's about forgetting everything else, coming together, fighting a game fairly but equally.
All right, very well said. What you got for me now?
All right, I want to go back to the draft real quick. So the draft was in Philly this year. Goodell has brought out and said publicly that he will be sort of doing a draft tour. So we might end up seeing it in Miami. We'll definitely see it in LA. That's confirmed because of their new complex. Do you like this? Or do you feel that New York still holds its own right as the draft town? Because, I was in New York this weekend. I could have been at the draft. But, of course, it was 30 minutes down the road.
I do love the idea of the draft being in New York. It has all sorts of tradition tied in with it, and I would love to see it back there permanently. That being said, this idea of the draft on tour, at least for now, is relatively interesting. I think it's kind of fun, especially if you give it to a couple different cities and it's not just centered on the East Coast. Coming out west to LA will be very interesting in the next couple years. So I like where Goodell is going, but if I had a choice, the draft would be back at Radio City Music Hall.
One thing I will say is that the NFL and both of the channels with it created an incredible finished product. When you saw Goodell announce those picks, it wasn't like anything was much different, but they added these core elements, of course, the Rocky Steps, and it didn't really. You could tell that it was outdoors and it was a good experience for that, but it didn't feel like that was an issue for them.
Yeah, not at all.
Yeah, so don't want to expand. This is rapid fire. I liked the Philly draft, but I would have rather have seen it in New York.
Going back to the NHL for a minute here, Kay. Who is your one player on any team that is the difference maker in these playoffs?
Sure. So I'm going to stick with my Preds again because obviously they have been the team of the moment. And I'm going to go with one player as their main actor, and that is their goalkeeper, Pekka Rinne. Rinne has had more stops in the playoffs than one, any Preds player before them, and two, any player in this season, or in this postseason. He has been the main difference maker. I mean, he had to stop Patrick Kane in Chicago. The Blues have great shooters. So that was their number one asset. So I'm going to go with him. And their supporting cast, PK Subban, Fiala was great. Players like that have made a huge difference. But I'm going to go with the goalkeeper, the goaltender, Pekka Rinne.
All right, there you go.
Yes, sir. I want to go back to the NBA real quick. I want to talk really quickly about Utah's form of, I touched on it briefly, but Utah's form of creating a team versus, let's say, Golden State's form of creating a team. Golden State has come out in free agency. Sorry, that's a bad example. I'm going to go with Cleveland. Utah has drafted all their players because they're not going to sign any free agents. Cleveland has went out and signed all their players, not focused too much on the draft. Is there one formula that works or doesn't work, or is it all about, where players want to play? As in, my main question, do you think the team should have more control or the players should have more control?
It comes down essentially to where the players want to play. It always has in almost any sport. So the power lies with them in that, if Utah all of a sudden develops the next LeBron James, players are going to want to come play with them, and that's where they're going to go. But otherwise, I mean, we've seen this week, especially with the talk coming out of the Warriors camp, that Utah's not exactly the place that you want to be as a player to go out and enjoy nightlife and enjoy your newfound wealth and all that sort of stuff. So unless you're developing these high-quality players and you get to a point where the team is good enough that is enough of a draw to get guys to come, then you're not going to be successful unless you have that.
That's a good point.
So there you go.
Mike, maybe one more question.
Last question for you, Kay. Going back to a little soccer, couple teams getting relegated from the Premier League this year. We have already cemented Brighton Hove and Albion and Newcastle as the two teams coming up from the English League Championship, but that third team coming up from the Championship will have to undergo a playoff. So out of Reading, Sheffield Wednesday, Huddersfield, or Fulham, who's coming up to the Premier League is with that last spot?
I think that the team that ends up coming up is really beyond me because I don't study too much on the Championship. I will be rooting for Fulham, though, because I think that maybe because it's the Clint Dempsey connection, I just like seeing their name back in the Premier League. I just don't think it's going to happen because they're about, 5 points behind?
The way it works, though, is they have a playoff. So the third team, the team that finishes in third, will play Fulham at 6, and then 4 and 5 will play, and they will go on a normal American-style playoff from there, with the winner advancing onto the Premier League.
That's really interesting. And so at that point, I'm going to root for Fulham, and I think that they might make it out. As long as they're in that playoff, that'd be really fun. Wow, that's cool.
There you go. You learn something new every day.
That's right.
And with that, that's going to wrap up our show. Thank you, everyone who tuned in, commented, asked us questions. We really appreciate it. We actually only have 2 more shows coming up before Bix and K, as you know it, comes to a close of its illustrious career with Mr. K over here graduating. But we will bring you 2 great final shows, so look forward to that. Thank you again for tuning in. As always, he's been Kay. I'm Bix. We'll see you guys in the next one.
Thank you so much, guys. Take care.